Fam, what's up? Good morning. Hopefully you got an extra hour of sleep today. My name is Kyle Henderson, Bama Football on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up on this video. Alabama needed help. They were ranked number 14 last week in the AP Top 25. You needed teams that were ranked ahead of them to start losing. We started in the SEC last night as Texas A&M lost to South Carolina. Why is this important? Well, Texas A&M, previous to this game, was ranked number 1 in SEC play. We knew that going to Columbia would present challenges. We know how good South Carolina was when they played Alabama. Last night, South Carolina beats up on Texas A&M by a score of 44-20. So Texas A&M now has a loss within conference play. But you needed more help than that, right? You needed other teams from around different conferences to start losing, teams that were undefeated. Well, happened last night as Texas Tech beat Iowa State. Iowa State going into this game 7-0, tied for first in the Big 12 with BYU, who is still undefeated. But you needed these teams to start losing. Well, Texas A&M is able to score 6 points in the final quarter to beat Iowa State. So there's another loss. So Alabama needs more help. Okay, well, we go to the ACC, and you have Louisville, who was able to beat Clemson. Now, we talked all week about Clemson playing really good football up to this point in time. Louisville is able to beat Clemson by a score of 33-21. So what that does is Clemson was ranked number 11. They were tied in the AP with Iowa State at the 11th spot. But you needed teams to start losing, is my point. And you have Louisville, who comes up with a really big win. I would imagine that Clemson still plays Miami well. Miami, they were trailing to Duke, then they rattled back. I think Miami might be one of the best teams in grass basketball, right? Plus, Cam Ward is absolutely balling out. This game also plays significance. We knew yesterday with Ohio State playing Penn State in Happy Valley, I don't think there was many people that felt, at least in the Alabama ecosystem, that Penn State was going to win this game. Maybe in the college football world. I know there was a couple guys. I think even Coach Saban, for example, picked Penn State. But James Franklin does not win big games. All right, him yelling at the fans definitely wasn't it. I think he's 1-10 all time against Ohio State. I have never thought that this team was a top 5 team. I have trouble even putting Penn State as a top 10 team, to be honest. When I rank the top 10 teams every Sunday, I just don't think that they have it. Look, their quarterback, he's been having a nice season overall, but it is a big win for Ohio State. And what it does is it moves Penn State down in the rankings, right? We knew that they would eventually fall in this game. Ohio State picks up a win, and they move to 7-1 on the season. But I never felt that Penn State was a true threat to really win this game. I knew even the score right here, 20-13. If you watch the game, I felt that Ohio State controlled the momentum of this game. So let's look at this Alabama football game against LSU, which has now become really a marquee event, and so much so that College Game Day is headed to Baton Rouge to watch Alabama and LSU. Of course, those rankings up top will be updated today, which is Sunday, November 3rd. I would imagine each of those teams moves up in the rankings. So right now, Alabama is a 2.5-point favorite. That's in Vegas, and they are a 69-point favorite on this ESPN Rap Poison predictor, right? This game has so much significance for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And before we kind of talk a little bit about that game, let's look at the SEC standings, and I'll explain why. When you look to where the teams fall right now, you have Georgia up at the top, who is the new number 1, I guess you could say, in SEC. And remember, there is no more East and West. The way that the SEC championship game works out is the number 1 team plays the number 2 team for the title game. Right now, Georgia is 7-1 on the season, so they have a better winning percentage than Texas A&M. That is why they are number 1. Then you have teams like Tennessee, who was able to come back and beat Kentucky. I think they trailed a little bit in that game. They also have a head-to-head win over the Crimson Tide, and they have a winning percentage, but they haven't played as many conference games as Texas A&M. Then you have LSU, who has a loss to Texas A&M, and then you have Texas, who has a loss to Georgia, and then you have Alabama and Ole Miss. Well, let's talk about this for a second. Right now, the best thing that Alabama has going for them overall in the season is that win against the Georgia Bulldogs, who continue to win in SEC play. That was a good game against Florida, by the way, last night. So if Alabama is able to beat LSU, clearly they climb in the rankings. But here's the interesting thing. When you look to the criteria in terms of where you are ranking these teams by the SEC tiebreaker credentials, you look to wins against common opponents. So look, if Alabama continues to win, and you have tough games, right? You play on the road at LSU, you play on the road at Oklahoma, and you finish out with Auburn. I get it. Oklahoma, things aren't going well for them. Auburn, same thing. They lost to Vanderbilt. with that said, we know the Iron Bowl. My point is, if they finish out in this season with 3 more conference wins, they'll have a record of 6-2. Look, I think the chances of them playing for a conference championship right now are pretty slim, but I think they continue to move. And a team that is now 10-2, if they can finish out, and I know this might be a little bit of rat poison because you have to win the games that are in front of you, I think Alabama is going to be really difficult to leave out of the playoffs, which is now a 12-team format. Now, please note that this coming Tuesday will be the first release of the college football playoffs. So every Sunday, we look at the coaches poll and then the AP poll. Well, we won't be looking at those anymore. I mean, in terms of like an overall glance, but the playoff rankings will be released on Tuesday. Now, remember, the number 1 from the SEC, the number 1 from the Big 10, the number 1 from the Big 12, and the number 1 from the ACC, they all get auto bids 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the rest of the teams are seated at large. So Alabama with that win over Georgia, you almost if you're an Alabama fan, you almost have to continue to hope that Georgia wins out because that only adds to Alabama. Plus, Alabama has a win over South Carolina, and South Carolina beat Texas A&M. Not going to get into the weeds on all that stuff, but as you can see, a win against South Carolina, a win against Georgia is certainly going to come in handy. And I know they lost to Tennessee, they lost to Vanderbilt, but those teams are also losing as well. Tennessee and Georgia play here in the next couple weeks, which should be really entertaining football game. So going back to this matchup right now, there are so many reasons why this game has so much at stake. Is it a playoff play-in game for Alabama? Probably still so. With the record of 6-2, you can't afford a loss right now in Baton Rouge. And we know this. Look, every single game is kind of a do or die from this point on because they have lost 2 games. I would think even if they did lose, they might kind of be on that cusp of a 12 to 15 type team. But you got to win. You got to play really good football. And I do think style points will come into existence. Against Baton Rouge, playing on the road, I think people will understand the challenging environment. We're all going to be looking at the play of Jalen Milroe, Jam Miller, Ryan Williams. All those guys are going to play a key role, but it will be the Alabama defense that will have a really tough test against Grant Nussmeier, a really good quarterback from LSU that has thrown the football. And I would imagine out of all the quarterbacks that Alabama has faced this season, some have been injured, some haven't been up to par. I would imagine that this guy is the best quarterback that they face. They've had an extra week to prepare for LSU. LSU has had an extra week to prepare for Alabama. You saw when Alabama came off that open week how well they distributed the football against Georgia. I would imagine they have a similar game plan going into Baton Rouge, a very challenging environment. But remember, Kalen DeBoer has not won a road SEC game just yet. And you know that Brian Kelly and LSU, the last time Alabama went to Baton Rouge, it was Brian Kelly who came away with the W. I appreciate you guys. I'll be back live later on when the AP rankings come out, kind of an AP reaction type video. But I just wanted to start out the day talking about some big, impactful games that happen on Saturday that certainly help Alabama's continued chances to make the college football playoffs. It's not over, all right? There's a lot of football to go. Have a great Sunday. Enjoy your NFL. I'll be back live later today to talk more college football. Kyle Henderson, Bama Football on YouTube. Fam, please hit the thumbs up. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.